Weafer to you in your business studio. Hiya, Sean.
Hi, Alec, great to be here.
Yes, believe it or not, it's June 2019 since we last spoke, so I'm not going to trawl back through your school days again. Any of our listeners can go back and listen to that on that show, which is on SoundCloud. You're still there with us. Good.
I am indeed.
Well, thanks. Thanks for keeping me on my toes. Anyway, listen, a lot's changed since 2019. Tell me what's happening in your world and how you've responded to it, because being a professional speaker, you would have been traveling the world and speaking on international stages. And of course, that's all changed. And what have you noticed in terms of business trends?
It's changed radically. I mean, to be honest, in March 2020, when we went into lockdown, everything fundamentally changed in my business, which was a mixture of coaching with corporate clients predominantly, obviously training in various areas, and obviously the event speaking and conference speaking. As of March, whenever it was, 15th or 16th, that just literally stopped. And it stopped dead for 6 months. I mean, there was literally no business from corporate clients, which are my mainstay, medium to large size companies, for 6 months. It literally just disappeared as they were trying to struggle how to find how they would deal with this situation, how they would cope with their own people working from home, helping them facilitate to be able to do that sort of thing. And all the other dynamics that started to kick into that. So different styles of management, whether broadband was adequate, where people were working from, trying to engage their people, keep them motivated, maintain and look after their mental wellness. A whole range of things kicked in while that happened. But then as it happened, so really it was just head down for 6 months. In September, however, the green shoots started coming together again. And I have to say, it's been tremendously busy since then, particularly at the start of the new year. And I think one of the reasons that is that actually what COVID has, well, it's been horrendous for so many people, and so many people have been challenged around their employment and all the other challenges that we've had as a result of it. And it has been a horrendous experience.
Yes, it has, yeah.
For me, professionally, it's actually helped me accelerate what I wanted to do, which I've been planning to do over 3 years. So what that means is I moved my business entirely to a digital plane, a digital format. So now I do all of my executive coaching, which happens to be in the States, in Canada, here and in Europe, all via Zoom or by Teams. I've redesigned all my training programs on being a high trust advisor in advanced communications or in business development, sales communications, where it's all delivered. And obviously the structure of it has changed. So previously you might have done a day's training or 2 days training. Now it's like a 2-hour content session. And then a week later you do a group coaching session to facilitate the learning. So actually it's become much more efficient, much more time efficient, and much more practical in terms of how people get benefits. And then speaking has moved online as well. I've done 3 or 4 speaking gigs. I have another one coming up in a couple of weeks' time with a mining company in South Africa.
Wow.
Or Rhodesia, I think, or Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe, yeah.
Now, which would probably never have happened if I hadn't gone to a digital format. So in many ways, I mean, I've had to invest in redesigning my website. It's been completely redesigned. Branding is redesigned. I've had to get used to apps that I've never had to use before. So for example, I'm launching a new show on the Clubhouse app tomorrow, Wednesday, 5 p.m. GMT, called The High Trust Advisor, which is all about selling, where I'll invite guests to come and talk, and we'll have a panel discussion every week. So it's been different. And I've also was able to launch a new book, which came out in December, called Cash, C-A-S-H, Coaching as a Side Hustle.
Very good.
Who's interested in working their role as a manager, or working if they want to set up their own practice. And I have a new version of my book coming out in March called The Highly Trusted Advisor: How to Lead Teams and Win Clients in the Hybrid Age. So all in all, it's been absolutely scary the first 6 months, but it's actually allowed me to move my business to where I always wanted to be, which is effectively an iPhone and a stand, if that's the way I want to run my business going forward. And I've made some fundamental changes to how the business works as well. So I would have to say it's been positive, very positive from a business perspective. Positive in the sense I've had my kids and my family around me, but very difficult in many ways because, like many of us, I can't hug my folks. Haven't done that for over a year. I can't see my sisters. We normally get together and have a laugh. Can't see friends. And all of us struggle with that. And I understand that for a lot of people, it's been very challenging. But professionally, it's been very productive for me.
It's been quite an interesting one. I mean, what you've done is you've typified that sort of entrepreneurial spirit in terms of, whoa, hang on a second, what's happening? Now, how do we adapt to it? You know, the glass half full rather than half empty. And you seem to have embraced also the change and challenges that technology presents.
Yeah, I think, to be fair for anybody, there's two ways you can look at it. You can either give up, or you can look at it how you find a way to deal with the situation. And let's be honest, I mean, it's not particularly insight on my behalf. The fact of the matter is, many of us who are self-employed business people, micro businesses, we have to find ways to survive, to thrive. And the way you do that is adapt, as many, say, restaurants did by being able to provide takeaway businesses, or find new ways to reframe what they do. It's not any particular gift or talent. It's just simply survival.
It's been interesting because a lot of your clients are large organizations, and they're often much slower to move. Would you say maybe that was part of the lag in the 6 months that you had to wait for them to start moving, or did you have to nudge them yourself along the route?
There was nothing you could do from the outside. This was all internalized as far as they were concerned. And I think there was a degree of fear around it. A lot of the companies I worked with some really good companies like Indeed.com, for example, are a great client of mine. They were well ahead of the curve in many respects. They were aware of this because of their global imprint, that this was going on in Singapore and Asia long before it hit us. They had plans in place for that. They were one of the first to move their people out. I mean, they managed it incredibly well and continue to do so. Similar to Microsoft, which is a client of mine, and they addressed that issue very well. So there was a period of change that they had to address, no question about that. And first and foremost was maintaining their ability to look after their customers, maintaining their ability to look after their client or their staff. And it was a whole new dynamic. And actually what this has done is proven something that a lot of people were very slow to embrace, which was the concept that we could deliver services and we could be productive working from home in a digital environment. And I think, if anything, that's why we've gone into what I now call the hybrid age, which is, moving forward. We've demonstrated we can work comfortably from home. We can be just as productive. I mean, there are certain challenges with it, and I acknowledge that, and we can talk about those.
Yes.
But I think the future is going to be, you've had a lot of CFOs looking at their real estate investments going, we need
Yes.
this anymore. And they were talking about that last year, not just currently as we are now. But I think people, particularly more mature people, if you will, people into their 30s, 40s, and so on, 50s maybe, are quite happy to work from home, quite happy to work in this space, and then go back into the office for that engagement time, that rejuvenation time, that bit of networking, that bit of social interaction. So the hybrid age is going to be us working both from home and from work. I mean, certainly one of the things I don't miss is getting on a plane every week, although I do miss getting on a plane at the moment. Anywhere right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you said, you talk about the hybrid age, and certainly the need to travel in terms of business will be substantially cut back, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, already, I work with really good company I work with also is Keywords International, who do a lot of the background work and for a lot of the EA games and the various games that you see out there, these computer games, which, by the way, I've also learned to use.
Oh, very good.
And I've been working with their sales team recently, who would literally be on a plane every day of their life,
Wow.
heading to California or Russia or Middle East, wherever the business was. And they have just all been working via Zoom. So they have already said, what a lot of the trips we previously would have had to do, we won't have to do going forward. That said, from a sales perspective, there is the additional challenge of how do I meet new people? So I actually think that when all of these lockdowns come down and we align them across the world, there is going to be an explosion in networking events, in conferences and exhibitions, as people scramble to get back together again, to connect with people in their industry, to talk to people in the industry, to make new relations, make new contacts. Even though a lot of the work itself, maybe after the initial meeting,
Sure.
looked at in a digital environment or on Zoom or Teams or whatever happens to be.
This is going to present a new challenge. And I know somebody who's, in terms of networking, you're not alone just a consummate networker, but also somebody who's been able to speak and coach teams around the whole area of doing it and building trust. A lot of people online just don't have that confidence in meeting in public again. I suppose this will present a new challenge for maybe some of your clients as well, and how they...
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a shift. I mean, you now have to network online, or you now have to find ways to engage people. I mean, one of the things that I say the biggest challenge that we have right now is in the world today, it's the getting and holding the attention of a prospect or a client or a colleague. There was some talk a couple of years ago about how Microsoft carried out some research and we now have an attention span of 8.5 seconds, or
Right.
less than a goldfish. Not true. The reality is that human beings are perfectly capable of sustained periods of deep attention, provided they are interested in what you're saying. Right. So the challenge very much is in the digital world, how do we capture and hold attention of people? Other than that, many of the things that you use, I mean, you mentioned networking would be very similar. How do you introduce yourself? How do you have a conversation? How do you qualify who the person is? These are exactly the same techniques. Now, certain things will have changed from a live room where you would deal with things like group dynamics,
Yes, of course.
recognizing who's in the room, who I can reach out to, who I should leave alone, are they closed groups, open groups, individuals, and so on and so forth. But when you get into breakout rooms at a Zoom conference, or when you see people there, there's other ways of addressing those things. And so having a conversation is still relevant, engaging a person is still relevant. The biggest issue is we're living even more so now in a world of mass distraction.
Sure.
It's easy to get distracted. The key thing is learning how do we, either in leadership or sales positions, capture and hold the attention of the person we want. And I have a very simple formula, which is basically that share of attention equals share of influence. Share of influence equals share of wallet.
Very good. Very good. And I suppose you will be talking to your teams and your clients' teams about this and how to engage better.
Yeah, we have a particular program called the High Trust Advisor, which is our business development or sales communications program, which is a CPD. Actually, that was the other thing that happened. I got a lot of my programs CPD certified.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah,
so they're
great.
now, anybody who takes them is CPD certified. In fact, actually, you reminded me one other thing. I've also launched an executive coaching school.
Great.
So we launched a school to train sales leaders and high performance and technical leaders and people who want to set up their own practice as executive coaches as well. And that's all available on our website, but it's also CPD certified. So the great thing was it got us time to develop a situation whereby we were able to take a lot of the work we've been doing, reformat it, reframe it, put it into very practical toolkit type functions, and then have an external body like the CPD Standards Authority say, yep, that's up to the standards it needs to be for a global market. So that was a big shift and change as well. But in the sales program, we focus very much on sales influence and sales communications and advanced communications, which would include things like being able to develop your mindset, your motivation, because we're operating remotely now, and your messaging that grabs attention, networking live and online, how presentations have changed because we operate in a digital hybrid world now. So we need to be able to do it live and we need to be able to do it online effectively. And there's some challenges with that. Quite apart from the fact if you're doing it digitally, you're operating in a two-dimensional environment, not a three-dimensional environment.
Sure.
So a lot that we would normally have, like breath, body language, all that sort of stuff that could be massively impactful in a presentation is no longer present. So we have to use different techniques to build trust and engage people. Working with different personalities and so on and so forth. One of the things we did introduce actually was a new one on managing your professional time.
Oh, very good. Yeah.
So boundary management has become a huge issue for people working from home, particularly if they're working in organizations that are global, because those organizations are working 24/7. We've been used to working 9 to 5. And now I have clients who are taking calls at 9 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock in the morning, and whose days have extended. And they've extended because they haven't taken into consideration the fact that actually you're not working in Ireland at the moment, you're working in the States. So you should be working on state time. So you start at 11 o'clock and you go on till 7 o'clock or whatever, things like that. Or knowing when you clearly draw a line between what you've just done work-wise and how you now step into your personal space. So,
and I think that's going to be a very important skill set to develop with people in terms of their own mental and physical well-being.
It's huge. Mental and physical well-being. I think people fail to realize just how much acceptance and recognition is for us as people and feeling part of something. Really, really important. Psychologically, the single biggest need we all have as human beings is to be accepted. So when we don't have that kind of, even if you're an introvert, it's important. I've actually found out just how introverted I am by how comfortable I am working from this office. I think I've met 30 hours outside in the last 12 months, 14 months, whatever it is. but realistically, we do need to connect with people. We do need to be around people. And that's one of the reasons why, we'll never only ever be digital anymore. People will want to get into the office. They will want to have the water cooler conversations. They will have to have the coffees. I mean, there are people who are working in very difficult situations where they're younger people, maybe they're sharing flats or apartments with people, and it's not conducive to working. And it's that extra stuff. So when we're isolated from each other, when we're remote from each other, it does have a massive impact on our mindsets, and also has an impact on our motivation. So we need to know how to take control of that and how to manage that effectively to stay mentally well and to perform at our best.
Just for our listeners there, Sean, where can they find out more about you and a lot of these topics that you're talking about?
Everything they want to find out about, whether it's the executive coaching school, our programs, or indeed individual executive coaching, is all on SeanWeafer.com, SeanWeafer.com.
Fantastic. And when we talk about hybrid going forward, this also presents a new challenge to people because either people were comfortable in the online world or in the offline world, but now they're going to have to work in both worlds and understand the different skill sets required around both.
Yeah, I think actually people have become sort of pretty used to doing the work when it comes to just the operational side of getting the job done. I mean, there are still inherent challenges. I think where the biggest shift, however, in moving into this hybrid age is this shift in how we lead people, how we manage people. Classic example of that is, I wrote a book which has just been re-released this month or next month called Invoking the Feminine, Strength, Love, and Wisdom, which is kind of like a little sort of metaphor or story about the importance of feminine values, feminine energies, as opposed to masculine values. So a lot of leadership is very much around masculine processes, command and control, competition, ambition, et cetera, which has its place, don't get me wrong, and hierarchical situations, which has, it's brought us from the Stone Age to where we are today. But the reality is there is a complementary element to that, which is this feminine aspect, which is about collaboration, co-creation, shared ownership, nurture, compassion, intuition, and so on and so forth. And for all leaders, male or female, doesn't make any difference. So I talk about leadership as genderless, right? We need to embrace both of these. And particularly in the hybrid age, when people are working remotely from you, you can't dictate anymore. Your expertise and your authority doesn't matter anymore, or at least not as much as it mattered if you were sitting in an office with very defined cubicles and everybody was in their place. In the modern world, leadership is all about being able to be facilitative, to create shared objectives together, to be able to empower and help, and very much to create the environment in which people can succeed. And that fundamentally has moved from command and control to a coaching or mentoring type approach.
It's amazing when you use the phrase invoking the feminine. I think for most people, it conjures up being female as opposed to what you're trying to explain.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand. We're not talking about women or men. We're talking about, regardless of that, we're talking about the feminine, as in, if you want to call it the divine feminine, or you want to call it just feminine energies, traits, and values. The world is made up of two elements, masculine and feminine, light and dark. You know what I mean? And it's not about the fact that they're opposite each other, although culturally they have been for at least 2,000 years. With the active repression of the feminine, and as women embody the feminine, the active repression of women, which continues into today's society in terms of language use, glass ceilings, and so on and so forth, although that obviously is shaping and changing now. But I'm talking about it as an energy, as a trait, as a set of values that both men and women both need to take on board. It's hugely powerful, and it would be a huge error to think that the feminine is also softly and nicely. I mean, you've only got to look at some of the ancient goddesses, like Kali, for example, or the Morrigan and Celtic spirituality. They were highly kick-ass individuals you do not want to mess with. So it's a powerful energy and value in and of its own self as well. But it's all about balancing the masculine and feminine. And without getting too theoretical about it, it's very much about us adopting our management and leadership styles to develop the skills of a coach or a mentor to bring people to us and work with them to create shared ownership, shared objectives, where they're comfortable to be held accountable to deliver stuff, where the clarity is in place to help them deliver consistently and every time. And that's one of the reasons why we set the executive coaching school up as well, is because a lot of managers don't have those skills, particularly in the sales area, because they're usually really good sales guys. Then they get promoted to manager, less good as manager, but eventually they make it a director. and less good as a director. Because they were really good.
I can see a pattern here somewhere.
But no, that's not saying they're not good, but sometimes they can be challenged in terms, they want to get involved in doing what they're really good at. And that is not necessarily what they're there to do. But evolving and learning to use coaching skills is one of the ways they can not only use their experience and skills, but they can map it onto the guys and really help them get the best out of their team when they're doing what they do. But it will be the same for a technical team or indeed any other team as well.
Yes, it's amazing. One of the more common things I think you and I have seen in life is where the top salesperson is made the sales manager. And so now you have a poor sales manager and you've lost your top salesperson at the same time.
Not in every case, but it can happen. It can happen.
You've talked about in terms of you're an author on coaching, but spirituality you've mentioned as well. And people would kind of, I suppose, raise an eyebrow to the value of that, but you know through the experience of life how important that is. Maybe you might explain to our audience more about that.
I suppose when I say spirituality, I mean, I'm not talking about, I think most people would appreciate it's not necessarily religious, for example. So when I was a kid, I mean, I was born in County Galway, and I lived the first 6 years of my life there. And my mother originally comes from a place called Caltra in County Galway. And, you know, the family there, you know, when you're a kid, you learn about things like Pishroiga, you know, how people would curse a particular field. And like, you know, there was all these, what they'd call superstitions, but were actually conventions, beliefs, faiths that were kind of left over from an older religion. I remember as a child in the front garden of my house, of my grandparents' house, and there was this whirlwind, and these leaves were floating up into the sky, but there was no wind. Like there was not a breath of air. It was hot. So obviously it been caused by some form of thermal vacuum that was just gradually raising these in a perfect spiral, these leaves from the orchard. And it was kind of freaky because you were just looking at this thing and there's no wind. Right? I mean, being an engineer, I know it was a thermal vacuum causing the void, blah, 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 right? But it was very interesting. My grandfather, he was an educated man, and he was a blacksmith, and he lived in America, made his money, came back, bought the house, et cetera, he said the ancient ones are visiting us.
All right.
Which was really interesting, because that's how they would have perceived that there was an alternate entity or beings or whatever were visiting the home, and this is how they made their presence felt. So there was a lot of this in play, like the trick-or-treating element of Halloween. Where that comes from was that if you didn't appease the spirits of the dead or the fairy, they would either curse your crops or they would bring you blessings, and that's why you left treats, you know, on the whole story. And that's where the kids now do the trick. So there's a deep spirituality that's a fundamental essence. I mean, as people say, if you scratch the bedrock of Irish Christianity, you come across, or if you scratch the surface of Irish Christianity, you come across the bedrock of paganism. You know, so that means we're still very much connected to the earth, and we're formed of the earth. You know, I mean, this is where we come from. We don't come from the sky, but we've been educated to look to the sky for salvation. I have no idea why, right? Yeah. So spirituality for me is finding a way of life that allows me to balance with the world around me, the people I'm with.
But you also see that as a fundamental part of every human being in terms of their business and work-life balance.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in a sense, it's spirituality is the way I look at it, is how we, I suppose, find a purpose in what we do. For some people, that's a Christian purpose, Islamic purpose, Jewish purpose. For others, it's a pagan purpose. For others, it's even atheism is a belief, a spiritual belief in some respects. You don't believe in a God, but you believe in yourself, you know? So spirituality is just really, I guess it's a way of how you try and make sense of the bigger world and how you live your life in alignment with that.
As somebody who travels internationally and speaks on business topics to large organizations, what do you see as the major challenges going forward in 2021? I mean, we should see some end of lockdown at some stage, but what are the key business challenges that you see out there?
Well, I mean, it's different for a large company than it would be for a small business, like a person on their own. I think for a small person, a person's lost their business because of the sustained lockdown, who's been very much in, I think as David McWilliams calls the crack economy. That's going to be challenging. I think, you know, my heart goes out to people who've had to maintain leases and rents and have done their best to look after their people. It's just unreal. Like, we're going to pick up after the equivalent of an economic war for a lot of people trying to, you know, small businesses like yours and mine, micro businesses, particularly those who use infrastructure or have infrastructure. that's going to be, I actually honestly think there needs to be a recovery program from the government that's going to stimulate or assist them with those areas. But that said, I do believe there's also a massive, there are people who've been consistently making money because they've been consistently employed through this process. There will be a massive economic impetus from the spending people will want to do. And so far, Amazon has benefited from it because there's been nowhere else, right?
Yes.
And they've become ridiculously more wealthy just ridiculously more wealthy as a result of that. I think when that disappears, people will want to get out. They'll want to do what's a very social process, which is get to bars, get to restaurants, go shopping, take holidays, have experiences. So I think that there's a potential for a huge upside on that. But I think there will be some kind of, this has been like a war, so we need to look at that. I don't think big businesses will have an issue. I think the biggest issue for big businesses might very well be the fact that their employees won't need to come from other countries to work in a given place anymore.
And that presents its own challenges around HR and many of the other
huge tax issues, all kinds of stuff. But I think what will happen now is twofold. One, we're going to compete with people from around the world who won't necessarily come here to get a job that's based here. But it also means we'll be competing for jobs in America or Russia, or France, and Germany, where we don't have to go there. We can do the job from here. So I think that's going to be one of the profound changes that's going to happen. This is truly where we start to see what we were talking about 20 years ago when they talked about the information superhighway. It's here now. And COVID has made that shift. I mean, in so many other ways. I mean, I used to hate the idea of using a credit card to swipe the card to do the thing because I figured, Big Brother was watching. Of course, I watch it anyway, right? But it's just a personal thing. I had some degree of control over where I spent it and what I spent it on. But now it's all card, and now I've just gotten used to using a card.
Yeah.
So there've been some fundamental changes on how that works, and I think from people buying things, it's much more seamless. I was talking to a friend of mine. You might know him, Alan Stevens,
yes, of course, yeah.
Recently, and he was saying that buskers have adopted to this in London. They now have a little sort of swipe thing. You can just touch for £1.
Excellent.
You touch for £1 and you've given them the tip, and it's just set up, no cash anymore. It's just bing, bing, bing as you go past, and that's just the way it is. Technology will. I think one of the other issues is we're going to see more use of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
In the transactional side of things, we're going to see it in terms of how it's managing people. We're going to see it how it does what it does. But all that means is there are things AI can't do. It can't respond to an immediate crisis. It can't innovate. It can't build a deep relationship with another human being. So in another sense, this is the classic almost automation of the masculine processes and deepening the need for the feminine processes of communication, connection, involvement, engagement, understanding, empathy. If we learn these skills, these will deepen our value and lengthen the length of time we'll be in a position going forward.
I suppose in the minute that we've got left, because we've just flown through that show, what next for Sean Weafer in 2021?
2021 is going to be an interesting year. I think fundamentally it's about growing the executive coaching school for me, because there's a whole load of ways in which I can help and support people, both in organizations as leaders and then externally for people who want to take a different direction in life and want to maybe do this kind of work professionally based on the experience and expertise that they have. So that's going to be it. And obviously maintain my practice and hopefully at some point get on a plane, or even before that, get somewhere I can have a nice pint of Guinness.
Fantastic. And if people want to find out more about Sean Weafer, where can they do that?
Just go to SeanWeafer.com.
Wow.